I often look back at the times that I've had a really horrible boss or a situation where a boss just acted very unprofessional. And you always think, I should have did this or I should have done that. But sometimes I think it goes a long way in showing your own maturity and your professionalism by not allowing it to get you so emotional or not having emotional reaction to it in the moment and to just take 10 and that's really served me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Project She Leads. My name is Nori Joaquin, your host. If this is your first time watching, thank you so much for taking time. I hope that you will consider subscribing. Well, today's episode is inspired by a movie, a comedy back from 2011 called Horrible Bosses. If you've not seen this movie, it is about three men who devise a plan to get rid of their bosses because of how miserable they're making their lives.
What?
3 hours late. What's the deal?
I was at your father's funeral.
Well, maybe that excuse would have flown when my dad was here, but I'm in charge now.
That excuse wouldn't make any sense if your dad was still here.
Whoa. In my office now.
But I think that there's something that we can learn and take away from Horrible Bosses. And to help me tackle this conversation is my guest, Sonia Miranda-Monroy. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a mom to two amazing grown-up children. I am a wife to a wonderful husband. And my role here in terms of leadership is I am an HR director. I have over 14 years of HR leadership experience.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So, horrible bosses. We have all had them. We have survived them.
Right.
But I think if you are anything like me, you don't want to be one of them.
Right.
And I think there's something that we can take away from all of our experiences that we've had. And so I really want to just start this conversation by talking about the controlling boss. Have you ever had a boss that's very, very controlling?
Yes, unfortunately. So the sad thing about controlling bosses or just horrible bosses is that often they mistake leadership for basically having power over people and wielding authority. But really what it's about is just empowering people, trusting them to do the job that you hired them for, giving them the tools that they need to succeed, and then just kind of getting out of the way so that they can do the best job that they can.
Right.
So, but in terms of a controlling boss, yes. And I have an example of that. I had a boss where, this person would basically bark out orders. They would control even the small things about the role and the position. So you couldn't do anything without getting their permission to do something. And so really this person pretty much created a bottleneck. But in terms of controlling, one example of this was, so because I'm in HR, people take family medical leave, so FMLA leave. There was one gentleman that was really sick and called me up and said, I have to take some time. I'm really sick and I'm going to be out for quite a while. So I put them down as on FMLA leave. Mm-hmm. My boss found out and came to me and in front of the person that supported me, so that I managed, and came to me and was like, why? I know that so-and-so is out, but why did you put them on FMLA leave? I saw on their timesheet that they're on FMLA leave. I saw in our system. Why did you put them on FMLA leave? And I said, well, because they're sick, they need to be coded as FMLA leave. She says, no, they didn't ask for that. You shouldn't put them on FMLA. Now, I have many years of HR experience. That is what you do. Even if a person doesn't ask for it, you would put them on FMLA leave. My boss didn't have an HR background, and that's okay. But she was really, I'll just say, gruff with me. Yeah. And no, you shouldn't have done that. That's not the way you do things. And I was like, actually, it is. Where? Show me where. Send me the
Policy?
regulation.
Mhm.
Yeah, send me the regulations and tell me why that's being done. Because if I don't see that that's allowable, I want you to change that. So very controlling and dismissive. You know, in
Right.
one fell swoop, dismissed all my experience and education. And it was really embarrassing that this happened in front of the person that supported me, because after my boss left, she told me, "Why do you let her speak to you that way?"
Mm.
And it was so, I actually felt embarrassed. I had to tell her, you know, one of my excuse to her, and I thought about it later and I'm like, that's really wasn't the reason. But I said, you know, I just kind of dismissed it and said, oh, she talks like that to everybody. And but later I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad that I didn't emotionally react.
Mhm.
I'm glad that I took 10 and just and said, yeah, I'll send you that. And I did, and proved her wrong. But you know, it was a tough situation.
Right.
So
Right.
that was my experience.
So I think one of the qualities of a controlling boss is someone that likes to dominate meetings. And I had an experience with a manager that during team meetings, he literally would talk almost the entire hour and really didn't allow time or space for anyone to contribute, to chime in on anything. I really feel like he just liked the sound of his own voice and would just talk and talk and talk and talk. And I had a situation with the same manager where he had berated me in front of the entire team. I had been asking him for some training in a particular area, and he hadn't really responded to any of my requests. And so I decided to take the initiative, which most bosses tend to like when their employees take initiative. I took the initiative to get this information. I had met with one of our other business units and got the answers that I needed. And my boss found out that same, like right prior to this team meeting, and just told me in front of everyone that I was not allowed to ever speak to anyone outside of this team without his permission. But it went like just beyond just giving me that instruction. It was like, how dare you do this and do that in front of everyone? And I was so embarrassed. And,
Wow.
you know, it was such he was very controlling in that way, you know, where he just felt like, you know, he needed to keep tabs on what everyone was doing. And, you know, whatever he needs to say, that overrides any contribution that anyone else on the team would want to share.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That didn't sound fun at all.
No. I think it's important to, you know, when you are in those situations, you know, that meetings are a great opportunity to, you know, get feedback from your team. You know,
Right.
it shouldn't just be about you going into this meeting and just sharing the agenda, sharing what's going on, and then just leaving it there. I mean, this is a time to, you know, have conversations, talk to the team, see what their thoughts are, see if you can pivot away from something else. And it really should be a back and forth, or maybe even more of a time of just listening rather than just going and then just doing, you know, all of the talking.
Right. Well, I think, you know, it also shows that you value your team's opinions
Right.
and their input into whatever it is that you're meeting about. So I think that's really important as a leader to do.
Right.
But obviously this sounds like a boss and not a leader.
No, not at all. I think one of the other characteristics too that kind of goes along with people that, you know, don't actually take time to listen to their team is to just not listen in general. And so there have been bosses that I've had who'll say like, oh, I have an open door policy, you know, feel free to always come to me and talk to me. And so I've had two bosses that have been very vocal about that, this open door policy, but then I go and I talk to them and it's like just falls on deaf ears. They literally do nothing. And it's so frustrating because you feel like when your boss, your manager is not listening to you or not doing anything about what you're saying, that they really don't have your back. They don't really care. Right. You know, they're just telling you, oh, I have an open door policy just to sound good.
Right. Well, I think it's important as well, as a great leader to advocate for your people.
Right.
And like you said, to really listen to their input, their thoughts, and then also to do something about it.
Exactly.
when they
exactly.
do speak to you. I had a situation where, and I'm in HR, so you would think that as an HR professional, you wouldn't have employee relations issues, but I did. I had someone that was not on our HR team, but that I had to work with really closely, and that was very combative, but combative even in email. And I went to my boss at the time, and it wasn't only me. There was other people on my HR team that went to my boss about this particular person. As a matter of fact, the company knew that this person was just a very difficult person to work with. And it was evident because there was a lot of emails going back and forth where you can see that this person
Right.
really was not a team player, did not want to collaborate with people. And I went to my boss, and it fell on deaf ears. It really, and he knew that I was struggling to manage the work relationship with this person. And really there wasn't anything about it, and it wasn't only my complaint.
Right.
And so it really made for a really toxic environment. And I was very honest with my boss and saying, this is creating such an atmosphere where I'm not happy here. Right. I'm not happy doing, and I want to do the best job I can, but this person is really putting up roadblocks and being very difficult. And he really didn't do anything about it. And finally, I ended up having to talk to that colleague, and I just I just was very honest with this person and said, I'm trying, to work with you. It just doesn't seem to work out. Here are some of the reasons, here are some of the behaviors that I see, and I just don't understand. That was such a good conversation with this person. Actually, this person started crying and apologizing, and we started working so much better. But it took that and years of people complaining about this employee and nothing being done. So and a boss that really advocates for you and has your back and really, helps you navigate any of these situations is such a good leader. But unfortunately, I didn't have that. So.
Right, but I think you brought up an important point. Like, if you are going to be the type of leader that has an open door policy, then you have to know that it requires action. And so you're going to have to walk away from that meeting, making sure that you have an action plan to address whatever that, employee has brought to you. It can't just be, I'm just going to sit here and just listen to what you have to say and then never bring it up again, never follow up, or any of those things. Open door policy means you're going to really take action. Another quality of a controlling boss is being manipulative. And I had a boss a long time ago that had gotten upset with me. And I don't even really recall why, but I'm sure it probably wasn't anything that was a big deal. But his response to being upset with me was to give me the silent treatment. And I remember I learned this the hard way because I went, I got upset with me. I don't even think I realized that he was upset. And then little later on during the day, I went to ask him a question, and his desk was like super close to mine. And he just literally did not respond to me at all. It just ignored me. And then, so I went to another colleague and I was like, I'm not sure what's going on. And she's the one who informed me, oh, he must be mad at you because that's what he does. He gives you the silent treatment. And to me, the silent treatment is probably one of the most juvenile, most immature ways to deal with conflict. But it is a way of trying to put your power over, someone else. Like I'm the one in control here, and I'm choosing not to be in the moment. I'm choosing not to speak to you. And then just trying to make other people feel bad or try to find ways of trying to get them, to get on your side, to understand why you're so angry.
Yeah, but that really makes a person feel so small when I could just imagine the feeling of going to speak to somebody and then it's crickets.
Right.
There's nothing.
Right.
And on top of the fact that it just seems very juvenile, it's just so unprofessional and disrespectful to do something like that.
It
And
really is.
yeah. And you know, you're probably thinking, because I often look back at the times that I've had a really horrible boss or a situation where a boss just acted very unprofessional. And you always think, I should have did this or I should have done that. But sometimes I think it goes a long way in showing your own maturity and your professionalism by not allowing it to get you so emotional or not having emotional reaction to it
Right.
in the moment, and to just take 10. And that's really served me, because my background is where you just like a firecracker, you know,
Right.
and you just get angry and probably say or do things that without thinking. And so I've really had to be intentional and really learn to really sit back and think about it and think about my reaction. And so, as I mentioned, when the person that supported me said, "Why do you let her talk to you that way?" I'm really glad that I didn't react in an
Right.
unprofessional way,
Mhm.
and that I did take the time. And so later on, I went back and gave her that tip about really, really thinking about it and being intentional about how you want to react, because how you react says a lot about
It
you.
really does. Yes.
So
It really, really does. Now I know like all of these, actions or qualities that a controlling boss has, they usually tend to lead to micromanaging. And if you've ever had a boss that's a micromanager, it is such a suffocating experience. It's like the killjoy of
right.
your day, of just or your whole experience, with that company. And but they always just feel this need to like be involved and be a part of like absolutely every single thing.
Right. Or just really directing your work,
Mhm.
really directing the outcome. And I think, when you hire talented people, you should give them the freedom to, basically, I've never understood how you hire these really smart, really, the best person for the job. I mean, they interviewed with you and you decided out of all the candidates that this was the person that can
Right.
do the job and can do the best job. But then you don't let them do that job. You basically manage every or most of their work.
Mhm.
And I like this quote that Steve Jobs had one time, and I'm just gonna paraphrase because I'm probably gonna, chop it up. But basically, he said, why hire smart people and tell them what to do? We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do, and
Right.
that's so
Love that.
true. So when you have a micromanaging boss, it makes no sense, because you really suck the life. It's like soul crushing, and you suck the life out of your employees because you're not allowing them to use their creativity, to use their knowledge, to use, you're not giving them that space, and you're really, really being a boss and just very directing and controlling. And it is a shame. It's a shame to do that.
It is. And it really prevents growth for your team, growth as an individual, because you don't have that space, because that micromanager is just hovering over every little thing that you do. And like you said, they're not allowing you to be creative. So if you're not allowed to be creative, if you have no autonomy, then you have no space to grow. And sometimes in some ways you almost shrink
Right.
down, and that's really not the goal of any team.
Right. No, it's not. I had a boss who, early on in my HR career, really just manage all of the employee relations.
Mhm.
And, as an HR professional, that is something that's a little bit difficult to learn in school, to learn when you receive your certification, to really handle, because there's so many situations that might come about. And, you can't obviously learn in class how to handle every single situation.
Right.
So this boss, I really wanted to get more experience in learning how to handle tricky employment situations, and would not include me in those. And so it really did stifle my growth because when our company ended up getting acquired, and they were really great about giving me warning and letting me look for another position, one of the things that when I would go and interview, I knew that I really did not have a strong employee relations background. And it's because my previous boss would just control that and wouldn't allow me to be, I would just hear about it afterwards.
Right.
So it was really unfortunate. And yeah, this person micromanaged, and it was not a good thing. But I'm hoping that she learned from that. And, because you don't hire people to be dull and unimaginative.
Yeah.
You hire them to bring their best to the workplace. So,
Right. And their success is your success.
right.
I think one of the other quality of a micromanager is someone that really has a hard time delegating. I worked for a manager that sometimes, like everyone on the team had their specific tasks they needed to do, but sometimes she would just decide to do some of them on her own. I don't know why, but she would just, like if there was some deliverables that were due and she knew who was responsible, she would just suddenly be like, oh, you know what? I went ahead and did that already. And you're just thinking, I'm sorry, why? And so one time she did that to me, and, I had a deliverable due on a particular day, and she just, emailed me and said, oh, don't worry about it. I already took care of it. And she'd never done that before. So I have no idea why suddenly she decided to do it. But I actually looked at what she submitted and it was incorrect. So, so I, talked to her and was just like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something? Because, normally I, submit this on this day and I saw that you did it. So I don't know if I missed something. And she was like, oh no, I just decided to do it. And I was like, oh, well, this was missed and that was missed. And so she was like, oh, I'm sorry. And after that, she didn't do it anymore, but she would do that to other people. And I just never understood why, if you're going to delegate things to people, why then take it back and then do it yourself? It makes no sense.
Right. Yeah, no, that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense. Perhaps she was trying to learn.
Perhaps, I don't know. I think too, also another quality is managers that tend to over communicate. And sometimes you may think over communicating is a positive thing, and you want to be able to over communicate with your team. But this particular micromanager, she was the type of person that just flew off the seat of her pants. And so it was not unusual to get 7 emails from her within about a 15-minute period.
Okay.
And sometimes they were super long, and it was just how she worked. She, she had something incoming. So then she would just immediately just disperse this big email to everyone on the team. And then she'd go to her next email, something else. And then she would just and it was just that too was very suffocating, because you're trying to get work done. And then she's just shooting all these emails to you. And sometimes it's oh my gosh, can you just stop and maybe just send one email, summarize? I don't know.
Right.
But it was
Bullet
just
points.
a lot. It was definitely a lot.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that must have been hard. I feel like I've been an over communicator, but not with 50 million emails.
Right.
But I do tend to, when I'm explaining something, to really, really over explain. But I've done that so that I can now let that person do what they need to do. And I'm kind of hoping that they got all the information.
Right.
But I think sometimes, I'm sure of this, that sometimes it's just so much information. They're and I've seen it before, where I feel like I've already told them this, and then they'll come back to me and they'll be like, so what did you want me to do with this? And I'm like, oh my God, I just spent a whole half hour explaining this and really talking about the why to this. Because that's another thing I think is really important about leadership, is not only to tell somebody that you need this done, but actually give them the back end so that they understand, so that their work has meaning, so that they understand, why are we doing this, and so that, also they don't feel like this makes no sense at all.
Right.
I can kind of explain that. But again, I found that perhaps I need to give it to them in smaller chunks, because just But I don't do that. The whole email thing, I can imagine it must feel with the 50 million emails as though you're shoveling while it's snowing and it just won't stop.
Right. Because I think with emails like this particular micromanager, I mean, first, she always wanted to be CC'd on things that really were, she didn't need to be involved with everything. There was still a layer of management between myself and her. So instead of allowing that person to kind of oversee things, she still wanted to be part of it. And so, which is, definitely, part of being a micromanager is just this need to be involved and be CC'd on everything.
Right.
Then the over communication. Sometimes when you get emails from your manager, you feel like that takes priority. So sometimes you will stop because you're like, oh, they just sent me an email. I need to, stop and read this. But because sometimes her emails were so long, I literally would not read them all. I would read like the first couple sentences and then I'm like, I'm done. And so I would miss things because then later it would just be like, oh, did this happen or did that happen, get done? And I'm just kind of like, I don't remember that being brought up. Oh yeah, it was sent in an email. Yeah, well, this email was like 10 paragraphs long. It's like, that's too much. And so, what I found, and I think you and I talked about this before, is like with micromanagers, it's for myself, my own personality. Like this is not a environment that I thrive in. And so it really caused me to be more passive aggressive, and which probably just perpetrated the whole situation and made it so much worse because it was just one of those things where I was always trying to like gain back control. And I think one of my small ways was not reading all of her, novel long emails. And it was just like, this is too long. I don't have time. I'm not reading this all. And then I wouldn't, and then something wouldn't get done, which probably just made her feel like, no, I need to write you more emails because you're not getting, and it's just this like horrible, vicious cycle that goes around.
Right. Or just that, you're not the right employee or you're not doing a good enough job.
Right.
Because I've been guilty of that, of taking some passive aggressive action, and it's really simply because you're right, you don't feel like you have that control, and that is the way of getting back some semblance of control, even if it's just in the most passive aggressive way possible. And so, but as I furthered in my career, I think, and this is tips for anybody who is dealing with any of these examples, is to be more communicative, and to really, talk through it. Sometimes you will be so surprised that when you give them your truth and really honest about how their behavior is making you feel, sometimes you can squash things before they get to the level of, okay, I have to leave, or they are wanting to let me go. So I think, and that's really taken a long time. It does take a long time to be brave enough to explain to your boss, okay, there are a lot of emails and I think I work better with less emails. Is there another way that we can figure out how to collaborate or how to get this through without, and, but that takes practice, and it takes learning to do that.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, everyone, this has been such a great conversation about horrible bosses. This is part 1, so we will be continuing this conversation in part 2. I hope you will join us. Thank you so much, Sonia, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, see you later.